All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So my name is Sarah Christensen. Margaret Gordon, oh, I misspelled your name, Margaret, I'm so sorry. Margaret Gordon is also here. And we are going to be talking about working with ISP data in Excel. So before we get into our content here, we have a disclaimer and retention of rights statement. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get into Therap now. So we're going to be talking about ISP data today. People use ISP data in Therap in a lot of different ways. It's used for goal tracking, daily notes, as well as several different types of forms that people come up with that they decide to complete in the ISP data section. So your staff enter ISP data after you create ISP programs. If you want to see an example here, select a date. Sometimes they have begin and end time, sometimes they don't. You have your tasks and your scores are a key component of ISP data as well. So we're going to be kind of jumping between Excel and Therap as we go through this information today. First, I do want to talk about how to actually get the ISP data into Excel. There's a couple of different ways you can do so. One way is through searches in the ISP data module. So if I go to my individual tab and I go to the ISP data section and I do a search, I can, from my search results, I can get the data out to Excel. So I would enter my date range, and I do have to use one of these options, program site, individual name, or form ID. So maybe I want to enter a few different program sites. And I can also control what status of ISP data I'm pulling into my search results, or limited in these other ways, maybe by the ISP program name, things like that. So here are my search results. It's showing me the first 100 records, but if there's more than 100, I will be able to get those when I do my Excel export. So with this Excel exports link, I have the option to export to Excel and to export to detail Excel. Okay. Now, in order to get those links, a couple of things have to be in place. I do have to have the ISP data section assigned to me, have the ISP data view role, or the submit, what would give me the capability of searching. And then for that export Excel link to show up, I have to have in my user privileges the export to Excel role. So that is going to be found down here under common roles. There's a role called export to Excel, and that's going to allow you from any search that you have access to export those results into an Excel file. The other major source of Excel data is going to be your report library. And there are two roles associated with report library. You have report library and assigned report view. So the report library consists of agency-wide reports that people can access regardless of their caseload, data for the entire agency. So this first one would give you access to any of those reports in that section. The second role, assigned report view, would be something you could give more limited access to people with. So maybe there are 5 reports that you want a nurse to be able to run every month or something like that. You could assign just those reports to them. So the report library, once people have access to that, is found on the agency reports tab. And you're able to, for those people who have the assigned report view, somebody with the super admin role can assign reports to them through these sections. Okay, and then to actually get in and view the reports, you would click view. And I can see that I have over 200 available in here. To narrow down the list, you can use the report name field. So if I type ISP data in here, I can see that there are several reports that are focused on ISP data. So we're going to be talking about several of these, and we'll kind of do this from a perspective of what you might be looking to audit in ISP data. So one of the biggest things that people want to be able to do with these reports is to identify when data might be missing and make sure their staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of the first area we're going to talk about, is missing documentation checks. Okay, so I've got this Excel file actually already set up with some of these exports. So what I'm looking at right now is an ISP data search. And so this is, I went to the ISP data section, I did a search for a few programs, and I exported that data out to Excel. So one of the ways that you can look for missing data is to use pivot tables. Pivot tables are a way for you to organize your data, so you're not looking at this, long list that seems kind of unorganized. You can make some sense of it, basically. So the way that I can get in and do that is, once I'm on this data, I can go to my Insert tab. And I just want to make sure that I don't have a particular column or row selected. If I just have any cell selected, this is going to work. Or I can select all of my data. Either way. And so when I click Pivot Table, it's going to put a dotted line around the data. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then this gives me actually a new sheet. And I can see that I've got this blank pivot table here, and my pivot table fields correlate with what the column headings are. So form ID, program name, site name, those are all available over here. I'm going to take these fields and work with them in the filters, columns, rows, and values. And so anytime you're looking to just count something to see how much there is, and this principle, by the way, doesn't work only for ISP data. You can do this with GERs, T-logs, whatever. Is I can take form ID and drag that down into values. And then it tells me there are 838 ISP data entries in my search results here. Okay. So if I look, that's how many rows I have. So that sounds right. Then I'm going to start to organize these. And I'm just going to put things in rows. So I can see 799 of those entries are for this program, Columbia 24-hour services. Okay, I'm going to take individual, put that next. So we have lots of data for Benjamin Jones, maybe not as much for all these other individuals. Put another layer, then I can see how much data is on each ISP program, what dates we have. I could try that in a column as well. So if I put the date in a column, you see it, just lists across like this, and say, okay, for this day, I can see nobody documented for Charlie, but Benjamin had, a bunch of documentation completed. So this is good if you need to get into what documentation has been completed and when. These are also really dynamic. So maybe I'm looking at it from this perspective, but then I want to change it up and see which staff are documenting. So I'm going to take out some stuff here. So now I've got program name, and I want to see the staff entered by will give me that information. And so I can see at the Columbia 24-hour program, Jeff and Milton are doing a lot of documentation. Calvin did a little bit. Casey did some. So I can kind of go in and see who all is doing documentation for each of these programs. Okay, you can also use filters if needed. So if I wanted to put something in a filter, let's do, just for an example, I'll do individual. So maybe I only want to look at data that was entered for Charlie Allen. it's going to let me do that. So you can use the filters in, you know, lots of different ways like that. Okay, so that's a pivot table. Helps you organize and see what was entered. Okay, so another way you can do missing data checks is through some of the reports in the report library. So the first one of those I'm going to talk about is exception reports. And so you'll find those under ISP data exception report by ISP program partial match or ISP data exception report by program. What the exception reports will do is they're going to show you what days data was not entered. So these are really beneficial for ISP programs where you expect the staff to document every day. And so let me go into this. I've got this on one of my tabs here. Okay, and this doesn't really require much fancy Excel knowledge. It's pretty straightforward just looking at it. So it's going to list out all of the days with no ISP data. So I can see for each ISP program, any days where ISP data was not collected. Okay, and so that works really well when your schedule is daily and there should be at least one ISP data entry every day. Okay, so there's, yeah, again, you're just kind of going through the list with this one. Okay, another thing, this is pretty new, is that we now have schedule and frequency as fields in the ISP program. I'm actually going to get into an ISP program to talk about this. So the schedule and frequency fields. I'm going to pull up this daily support narrative as an example. Oh, where are they? Okay, so for this one, the frequency is 3 and the schedule is daily. What that means is that there should be 3 entries on this ISP program every single day. You could also, so the options you have for this, let me just do a new ISP program so y'all can see. Okay, so you're gonna have frequency between 1 and 50. Schedule is daily, weekly, or monthly. So let's say that you are operating a day program and we have an ISP program that has 5 different goals, all in the same ISP program. Some of those goals get worked on every day, some a couple times a week. If you've got multiple goals in the same ISP program, your frequency and schedule really has nothing to do with the frequency of and schedule of each goal. It's more about how much data do we expect in the system. So if this person comes to day program 3 days a week, and there should be 1 entry each time they attend, then 3 weekly would be the way that I would configure that schedule and frequency to get the output and be able to leverage these reports. Okay. So to find those reports, actually, I need to do that in Therap. So I'm going to go back to the report library. And search by schedule to find schedule and frequency. I could have also searched by ISP data. And you'll see that there are 3 of these available. There's one for the daily frequency ones, one for the monthly, one for the weekly. So I have an example here of the daily one. Okay, let me make this a little bigger. So this gives me a list of ISP programs, and in this case, dates. Okay, and so I can see for Ashley, her expected schedule and frequency is 3 daily. On this day, on March 1st, no data was entered. So there should be 3, but in fact, there were 0. This variance column will tell you what is the difference between these. So 3 minus 0 is 3. So there are 3 entries we don't have that we should have. So ideally, you want your variance to either be 0 or be a negative number because people entered more than they had to. So like these zeros, actually, let me freeze these so you guys don't lose the headings. I'm going to freeze the top row. So that's another Excel thing that is helpful. Okay, and actually I'm going to go ahead and put filters on too. And basically, you know, anything that's not 0 or negative, these are the ones that I need to be concerned with. These are situations where people are not entering the data they're supposed to. So in this case, you know, sometimes it's just that no data was entered, the total count is 0. Sometimes maybe it's 1 was entered, but I should have had 3. So if I need to get into the details of what was entered, I can use this report in conjunction with some of those others. So the ISP data search would be one option. Another option you could work with would be the like the ISP data basic report. So this is going to be really similar to what you have in the search with a few extra fields and just list out, you know, all the entries. I'm not giving all the details, the tasks, the scores, just a list of what we have. So I could take this and do a pivot table like I just showed from the search. I could do that, you know, from the search or from the ISP data basic report, and then compare that to my schedule and frequency report and see more details and maybe go back and figure out who didn't do their documentation, who did, and make some more sense of this. But this is really good information that you can get and something we've only really been able to do since recently. This report just came out a few months ago. So definitely, if you are not using the schedule and frequency fields in the ISP programs, I really encourage you to start doing that. Okay. So those are the options. Oh, there's one other option for missing data checks. So another option you can use is the ISP data report from EVV. So this report works if you have configured your ISP programs to document ISP data from the EVV section. And so there's this report called ISP data report from EVV. You can run this for all your programs, or you can filter it down to a specific one. You have both options. And then the output looks like this. And basically, it's pretty straightforward and simple what you would need to do in Excel. You would simply put filters on to your columns. And there's these ISP data, date of service, entered date and time, ISP program name, and ISP form ID. And ISP data form ID. These will be blank if no ISP data was entered. So I could take any one of these, uncheck the select all option, and filter for blanks. And this lets me know these are the staff who did their EVV, but did not do ISP data for those sessions. Okay. And so simple filtering like that would work. I could also do pivot tables. That's always an option. So if I wanted to do the same kind of thing, let's take service provider and put that as a row. And then I'll filter for all of the blanks. Let's see. And these are the staff who didn't do ISP data. if I take schedule slot form ID, then I can see how many slots they have that are missing ISP data. Okay. So lots of good options for missing data checks. Another thing we can talk about here is late entry checks. So in many areas, there is an expectation that documentation be entered within a certain time frame. Sometimes it's just your agency preference. Sometimes it's actually a state regulation that you cannot get paid if documentation is late. So I think that's something that every agency is looking for to a certain degree. So we have some reports that can help with that. Okay. Okay, here it is. So ISP data report, time difference between entry and service provision. So I'm going to just pull this report up in Excel. Okay, and so basically this is going to list out all of your ISP data entries, and it will tell you the entered date and time, as well as the data collection date and the begin and end time that was entered, if that applies. So let's see, let me go ahead and freeze these again so I can scroll around if I need to. Oh, did I do that? Okay. All right, and then I'll go ahead and put filters on as well. I just used a little keyboard shortcut for that. So if I look at this entry in particular, I can see this was for 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. Okay, and then Michelle entered this at 11:21 a.m. So it was 21 minutes after the service ended. So column O is going to tell you the time difference in minutes based on the end of service. So this is 21 minutes after her shift ended. End of day would be, based on 3:24 at the end of the day. Okay. And then you have the date difference in days. And this is helpful for situations where maybe you don't have begin and end time. And so you need to just know how many days difference. So you could use filters here. You could do number filters. So maybe our agency rule is that you have to do your documentation within 3 days of the service being provided. I could filter this for anything that is greater than 3. Okay, and so then I'm just looking at anything that's outside of our agency's rules. You could use that same principle with the minutes fields if there's a certain number of minutes that you want to monitor for after the end of service or the end of the day. You do also have the time differences by update. So if people are maybe documenting and then going back and updating their ISP data, this will tell you within what time frame they did that. If it's blank, then they didn't ever update it. They just entered it and that was that. So I guess this is not only for late entries, but also maybe you have an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift. Somebody gets in and does their data collection at 9 a.m. and they never go in and update it. That's also something concerning that you would be able to identify as happening through the use of this report. Okay, and those number filters are really helpful here to narrow down to just those ones that are of concern. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is how to calculate sums. So in a lot of ISP data, you are collecting begin and end time and keeping track of how many minutes or hours of service somebody is receiving. So that information is available through the ISP data basic report. You can see how many hours and how many minutes. Something kind of quirky and fun with Excel is that and specifically with Therap exports to Excel, and I'm saying fun sarcastically, is that things will format as text even though they are numbers. The way you know if something's formatting as a number or text is the alignment within the cell. So for this duration in minutes, it's aligned to the right. That tells me that it's already formatting as a number. You can also see this if you get into your filters and if it says number filters. If I go to duration in hours, it says text filters. So that also tells me this is text, it's not a number. There are some ways that you can convert duration in hours. It's a little complicated, and anytime you have duration in minutes, I would encourage you just to use that. If you need to convert it to hours later, it's honestly going to be easier just to use minutes and then use a formula to convert to hours after doing so. So that would be my suggestion. So what I'm going to show you is how I could see a sum of how many hours of service. And we're just going to assume for this purpose that this duration minutes always correlates to hours of service or minutes of service. I know that's in reality, it may not always, and you might need to filter down and limit what you're looking at. So just keep that in mind, but we'll just go through what the process would be in Excel. So I'm going to use a pivot table again. I love pivot tables. I'm going to click OK here. And for this, I'm going to use a different option in my values. So the last one I was showing, I used form ID in the values because I just needed to count how many entries there were. This time, I'm going to use duration in minutes as the value. And you can see here that it is giving me a sum of the durations in minutes. You can also, if it doesn't automatically do sum, you can click on this value field settings option. Like if it's doing count, you can change it to sum. But usually Excel is good and is able to figure that out. So then maybe I want to organize by program, by individual, and by date. And so we've got a lot of zeros because there's some ISP programs that just don't have a time component, but let's look at Benjamin here. So, you know, this is what his minutes add up to. I think this might be more than 24 hours, but yeah, I can see the total for this whole time frame that I've pulled the report for, as well as the total for each day. Okay, you could also do this by staff. So if I wanted to instead pull in service provider, I can see for each service provider what their total was for the entire month or whatever time frame you're pulling, and then what that breakdown looked like per day. So really easy to get those sums using a pivot table. Okay, I'm going to go back to the ISP data basic report. Another thing I think is really helpful that you can do from here is to, if you're doing ISP billing, to determine what all you are billing for from your ISP data. So this has column O is billable, column W is billed. So what I could do here is I could say, I just want to look at the ones that are billable, and I want to see which of these are billed. Now in this case, none of them. We're not doing what we should be doing at this in this fake agency that I'm pulling data from. So really you would want to go down and make sure that it says yes all the way down. So that's a really helpful thing that is available in the basic report. All right. Next, let's look at some of the detailed reports. So we've been looking so far mostly at reports that just show you a list of the ISP data that was entered or that wasn't entered. We have some reports that will actually pull out all the details of the ISP data. And so that would fall under any of the reports labeled in the report library as ISP data detailed report. Okay, so there are a few different ones here. This also would apply to when you go to the search. And there's at the bottom, there's two options. There's export to Excel and export to detailed Excel. So they're gonna follow the same pattern. So if I use this ISP data detailed report, this first one is for all ISP data from my agency. So for all ISP programs. So the details that we are referring to here is that it is going to pull out all of the tasks. So the task name, the task description, what score was selected, and what scoring comments were entered. So this is information you will not get in the basic reports. This also means that there are going to be multiple rows for each ISP data entry. So you can see actually the form ID, and I've kind of just been casually referring to the form IDs without really talking about those and what they are. So let me back up just in case I've left anybody totally lost as far as that goes. So form ID is just a unique identifier that gets assigned to each piece of ISP data, really to any form in the system. Okay, so if I look at these form IDs, I can see that it goes like all the way down here. So there's, you know, I think like 7 different tasks in this ISP program that's causing this to have these multiple rows for one ISP data entry. So that's why, it's just because we've got this many tasks for this ISP data, and so it needs to repeat all the other information in order to display the information for those tasks. Okay. So here is the ISP data detailed report exported to Excel. And we have, you know, some specific ways that we direct people to use this in certain states and things like that. I have a couple of just general ideas I can give you about ways you might use this. One would be filtering for particular scores. So maybe you want to see all of the instances where somebody selected a score of like declined, and hopefully you're a little more consistent in your scoring. We've got declined, declined goal, declined opportunity. Some people use the word refused. Okay. So, oh, I meant to keep the declined too. Okay. So basically, you could see if there's a major pattern with that score being selected. Again, anytime you're doing filters, you could also consider doing that as a pivot table. So I could put form ID down into my values, put my score in as a filter. Maybe I'll put in individual and ISP program as my rows, and then come up here and do that same thing. Okay. And so then when I look at it here, I can see, you know, for the most part, there's not a major pattern. I can see Annabelle had, you know, 9 instances where she declined something that was offered. And I think that's helpful just so you can really hone in and see maybe people have goals that were chosen for them that they don't actually want to work on and need to be reevaluated. So being able to look at all the data together rather than relying on, you know, pulling up one person at a time and looking at theirs, that can help you really quickly see if there might be a potential issue like that. Okay, so that would be one idea for using the ISP data detailed report. Another potential idea would be if you are doing like a progress note in Therap, and I'll show you an example of this so that it's a little more concrete. So this one that we have for Ashley Wilson here. is designed so that an agency could basically use this format for their daily notes across all individuals. And so you may have like designated questions, like did they go anywhere in the community? Is there any health or medical information to report, and so forth. And in this example, it looks like they're using C narrative if there is something to report, and N/A if there's not. So how this would translate to using this report would be I could filter, just for the task that deals with community participation, for example. And let me take this filter off. Okay, and then I could look at all the scores that indicated that the person did something in the community. Again, ours are kind of all over the place. So if you're more consistent with your scoring, this is much easier. But basically I could go through and see all the scoring comments, see where did they go in the community, that kind of thing. So if you wanted to look at a specific aspect of all of the progress notes, if you're using a similar format across multiple individuals, then that's something else that you could leverage the ISP data detailed reports for. Okay. Another capability we have with the detailed reports is we do have one that focuses on the mobile app and the specific things you can do in the mobile app. So there are some features for ISP data that we have in the mobile app, but not on the browser. So this report, let me show you how to find it. Which one do I need? Okay, so back in the report library, one of the options under ISP data detailed report is including geolocation, signature, and photo information from ISP mobile. So if you run this report, you can filter to see which ones are mobile entries, or you could do a pivot table to see how many, what percentage of entries are from the mobile versus not. So a couple things you can do with this column. And then if you're expecting that people will get a signature, looks like we're not doing signatures at all here, but if that's a requirement you have in your agency, you could audit whether those signatures are happening. Okay, and same for the geolocation and for the photo. Okay. With both the ISP data detailed and the ISP data basic report, you are going to have some options that filter these reports further. So this one, ISP data detailed, is all of our ISP data across the entire agency. I could also run that report by individual if I wanted just one person's ISP data. I can do it by ISP program. That means that I am typing the exact name of the ISP program. And that does work if you are consistent with your naming and have lots of individuals with the exact same ISP program name. You could also do a partial match. So what that would mean is, just as an example, maybe I have lots of ISP programs that have the word daily in their title. And so it's going to pull only ISP data that has daily in the name of the ISP program. Okay, and then there is a by program option where I would select a program and site. We have similar options if you look at the ISP data basic report. Not as many on there. Okay, so I'm actually going to look at ISP data detailed, this one that's by individual, which for a while I had no idea why this would be useful, but I actually did find an application where I think it is. And that application would be behavior graphing. Oh, and this person doesn't have any, but we have the task name, included in the ISP data detailed report by individual. If you were to do the ISP data search, that task name, which is a shorthand, like 20 characters or less, that would not be available if you just did the ISP data search. So I'm going to take a stab at doing a behavior graph. And this will give me an opportunity to show you a couple little Excel tricks as well. So, so this is the ISP data detailed report by individual. This person happened to only have ISP data from a particular program, but really if I pulled this report and they had 5 different ISP programs, and I really only wanted to do my graph from one of them, I would need to clean this up and remove the data from the other programs. And so I could basically filter for the ones I don't want to include and then just delete those rows. Okay, but in this case, I happen to only have one ISP program already. So what I want to do is let's say that you're working with a behavior specialist who doesn't like the graphs that are in the ISP data reports in Therap. They want to do their own graphs and have, you know, a little more flexibility with how they make those look. And so they want to do those in Excel. So that is something you can do. This ISP program is set up with a count scoring method. And so let me actually pull it up so you can see it. So basically, oh, I did that thing that, okay. I need to click new to enter data. So basically when the staff are documenting, they're saying their shift times at the top, and then they're entering how many times did this behavior occur. So verbal aggression, physical aggression, and property destruction are the target behaviors we're tracking for this person. These are all target behaviors. You could certainly also track positive or, you know, replacement behaviors in this kind of format as well. So that's what we're doing. That's the data that we are working with here. So I can see my scores are here, and I have text filters. So that tells, and it's aligned to the left. It also has this little thing that says this number is formatted as text. So I've got several ways that I can tell that these are not going to work as numbers unless I change something. So actually, when it gives you these things, you can convert to number. It's not always going to give you that option though. So my preference on how to convert to number is to use a feature called text to column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this column. I'm going to go to my data tab, and I'm going to click on text to columns. And in this case, I can just click finish. I don't have to work through the steps, and it's going to move it to the right side. And now I have my number filters, so I can tell this is a number. Okay, you actually have to do the same thing often with dates if you want to use the dates in a meaningful way, which I do in this case. I want to plot those on my graph. So I'm going to do text to column. This time I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to make sure that this is a date. And similarly, it moves it to the right. When I click on the filter, I now see that I have date filters. And so that is good. That is what I want. Okay. So I'm going to try to do a pivot chart here. So pivot chart is kind of similar to pivot table. You initiate it from the insert tab here. So pivot tables over here, pivot charts over here. Okay. I just want to make sure it's selecting all my data. It is. And click OK. So again, I have filters and values, but when you're dealing with a pivot chart, you instead of rows and columns, you have axis categories and legend series. Okay. So I'm going to pull up a little cheat sheet here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I want the task name to be my legend. Okay. I want the sum of the score to be my value. So let me go find score. Okay. And then I want to see over time, are these target behaviors increasing or decreasing? So I need to pull in the date. I'm going to do that as my axis. So that is going to be data collection date. Okay, and I want the dates actually broken out. So it's kind of assumed that I want the months. I'm just going to drag that out. And so then what I'm left with is I can see, okay, so verbal aggression is gray. This is just a beautiful graph. Clearly we're doing something right here. Helping this individual find a good replacement behavior so that this target behavior can decrease. The physical aggressions, I really like using data labels. Okay, so I can choose to display those several different ways here, in the center, on the top. All right, and so I'm able to see the data in a different way. Okay. So I think that's about all I have for today. Does anybody have any questions? I can definitely try to answer questions if people have other things they were hoping to get out of today's session, but those are a lot of tips and tricks that hopefully will be helpful to you.
I'm not seeing any questions as of now. I did get one answered just a few minutes ago, though.
Oh, okay. Great. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap things up for today. Thank you all so much for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.